Welcome to the Journey to Birth podcast. I'm Tristan, the creator of the Natural Birth Compass online childbirth education program. And today, I'm excited to share with you the final episode of the four-part series from a workshop that I held in June of 2020 about the 4 critical strategies that you need to prepare for natural birth. This final installment of this workshop series will cover the 4th of the 4 critical strategies, which is all about finding your strengths so you can bring everything together from all 4 parts of this workshop to build more confidence and trust in yourself for your birth. If you're enjoying these workshop episodes, be sure to subscribe to the podcast, as I always continue to bring content like this to the Journey to Birth podcast and to the Natural Birth Compass community. If you would like to be notified of upcoming live virtual workshops, please visit naturalbirthcompass.com/natural birth workshop so you can be the first to know when we're enrolling for our next workshop. And now, let's begin the Journey to Birth podcast. Imagine transforming the anxiety, the worry, and uncertainty you have about your birth right now into the confidence and knowledge that will end everyone's questions about your natural birth and even have them asking you how you did it. Are you ready to stop imagining your wonderful birth and start preparing to experience it? Then you're in the right place. I'm Tristan, the creator of the Natural Birth Compass online childbirth education program. And I'm coming to your ears with perspectives of birth from across time and cultures to help you become more informed and confident in your birth. So grab your mug, fill it with your favorite tea, and let's begin the journey to birth. I can't believe we're already at day 4. It's been a lot of fun doing these workshops. I love talking about birth because that's kind of the definition of a birth junkie. So, it always makes my weeks a lot of fun when I get to come and spend time with mamas or other people who just really love talking about birth, especially when it's, we're talking about natural birth and just how beautiful and amazing it really can be when it takes place in the right environment with the right people and the right support system. So I hope that you guys are getting a glimpse into what that really can feel like and be like for you. I recognize you all as people who've actually been able to come here live every day, which is such an amazing thing that you're doing for your birth and for your baby. So I really want to honor you for giving up all of this time this week. By the time we're done, it's really a little over 4 hours because a couple of times I went over time that you are really devoting to yourself and getting ready for your birth and for bringing your new baby home. So I just want to, thank you for spending your time here with me and for allowing me to be part of your birth journey. It's really quite an honor whenever, somebody is able to be a part of something that's such a huge part of your life. So thank you very much for coming every day, spending this time with me. And if you're just watching the recordings and you aren't able to attend live, the same for you, spending the time watching this and getting ready and really thinking about yourself and what you need for your birth in order to make it successful. It's a really big investment that you're making in how you're going to be able to be really present for your birth and to work toward having a birth experience. It's going to be really positive for you. So does anybody want to share what any of the biggest aha moments or takeaways or the biggest learning curves that you've experienced over the course of this week? Are you finding things about this approach to be helpful or different? Is it different from what you've heard in other ways that you've been preparing for your birth up to this week? And I'm also curious if it feels like something that you will be able to really take with you into your birth room. Are you feeling comfortable and confident in bringing this in you as a tool for your birth? So today's material is going to bring it into a little bit more of the practical realm as well. We're going to start to focus on your strengths and building confidence so you can go to your birth feeling prepared, feeling confident, being able to get into that really deep labor place in your mind and in your body. And we'll keep discussing the importance of having support of your birth partner and your birth team. These things might be sounding familiar to you. These are those 3 keys that we read about in that study for creating the empowerment that leads to having ultimately a positive birth experience. And then I have some stories to share with you today, some of my students that I think will help really tie all this together and make it feel real. You'll be able to see how this actually can come out for you in your actual birth. And then I'll try and get into the birth cycle a little bit today as well. So you see what that looks like and you can start to picture what that framework looks like. Natanya, oh, I'm so happy that you have had your husband be involved in this too and being able to have that open dialogue. That is such an important first step into getting ready for ultimately what you both want in your birth. And hopefully it's allowing him to see that he can really step up and be a big part of your birth experience and help create that space and that structure for you. Samantha, your husband was a north. Okay. I think we were thinking maybe south, weren't we? So yeah, we have a few north husbands. I am going to move on unless anybody else has anything else they want to share about their experience over the week. First, I want to share these 3 steps to confidence. So, in order to really build up this confidence in yourself, trust in your decisions and your choices, first, you really want to know your type, which is, of course, what we've been covering in quite a bit of depth over the last 2 days. So, hopefully, you've had some time to figure out your type or do the assessment if you weren't sure from what we talked about in the workshop so far. And if not, you're still welcome to let me know if you need any help with that. And I can help you pinpoint what your type is. And then number 2 is to practice using the strengths and preparing for the challenges of your type in your everyday life. That's what you'll continue doing after this workshop is taking this new knowledge and putting it into practice every day so that by the time you get to your birth, it's second nature. You don't have to think about it or work at trying to make it work for you. It's just already part of how you interact with the world. And then the third thing for building confidence is getting educated with the right kind of information. When it comes to childbirth, there's just so much information out there. I brought up previously that more information and facts about birth is not really what makes a successful birth or what makes successful birth preparation or what's going to help you in labor. We read in that study that none of the women who provided information about what helped them have a positive birth experience was knowing a bunch of information and statistics or being able to time their contractions or anything like that. But on the flip side of that, I also don't think that we can just avoid preparation altogether and just trust our body to give birth completely naturally with no preparation. Now, I think we could do that if we were exposed to normal births throughout our life so that we really did know that birth was really a natural process and we had seen healthy normal births a number of times. But today, very few of us really have that experience. And even, for those who have had the opportunity to see a natural birth and to see a natural birth unfold without being disturbed or without being intervened with, we still live in a birth culture that by and large really doesn't trust birth in and of itself. So when our medical providers don't trust birth, it's hard for us to give ourselves over to them and try to trust birth in that kind of environment if we haven't done the preparation. So, what they do instead of trusting birth is try to control it with all of the interventions that are offered up in many, many births and probably many birth stories that you've heard from friends or family members. So today I want to share what it really looks like when you use these 3 steps to build up your confidence, to build up your trust, and bring your strength into that birth. So, to show you what this looks like, I'm going to start with the story of one of my past students. This is Jen, and she and her husband both participated in our full course to prepare for their first birth that they were having with midwives at a birth center. So, I have here's what she said about her birth. She says, I was much more at ease and more emotionally prepared. I felt like I knew what to expect every step of the birth and prepared to take on any challenges thrown my way. That gave me confidence and peace of mind. I was interested to see how focused I became during my labor and my reliance on the compass cycle for recovering for the next contraction. Now, The compass that she's referring to here is the next level of what we've been talking about with your birth type, where we combine your birth type with the birth cycle, with contraction cycles, and all of these different layers that all come together into one simple framework that I will show you in a little bit. That becomes so second nature because it really is, once you understand it, it's so simple and it's so intuitive, and it's really just based on factors that you're already experiencing every day. In fact, you're really experiencing them right now, right at this moment. There's some part of these cycles that you're already flowing with. When I talk to a mom like Jen, who put everything into her birth preparation. She took the course, she asked questions, participated in group calls to make sure she was prepared. And then when I hear her tell her birth story in her voice, it comes through when a birth is so empowered and when it made a mom so recognize how powerful and capable she is. You can hear how strong she was during her labor. When I had the opportunity to go through her birth story with her afterwards, how she describes how she really felt in control, how she felt like she was the one making decisions for her birth. And when she told me this story, the way that she described it, how the things, of course, that I really picked up on and really loved about her story was how she and her husband were able to work together so well during this birth because they both went through the course. So they had this shared language and this understanding of the compass that we teach throughout our program. So they both knew their types. I'm so happy that some of you here have been able to bring your birth partners into this workshop, or at least have them figure out their types and start discussing what that means for your communication, because it makes such a big difference in your birth when you can really have your birth partner involved in that way and you understand the different ways that you operate in the world. It kind of can help somebody to walk in another person's shoes when you understand that their kind of filter through which they see the world is a little bit colored by different traits and different types that we all tend to resonate with. Well, we already talked about a little bit the theme and the three keys of that positive birth study that was in that study that we talked about a couple days ago. That theme was about feeling empowered as the primary factor in feeling like, for those moms, feeling like they had a positive outcome. So those specific three keys that they brought up were trusting their body and facing the pain, having that connection between their mind and their body so they could get into that deep labor place, and then having that constant support of their birth partner. And you can see, even just in this bit of Jen's birth story, that she experienced the theme and the three categories, that she was able to access her strengths to support herself through her birth and be the one making decisions that she needed to make for herself and her baby. So she was able to take ownership over her birth and be the one guiding it. She had the control and she had the trust in herself that she needed in order to make decisions. And she had that extra support of her husband, not just to be there holding her hand, not just to be there timing her contractions, but that real deep level emotional and physical support that comes from really understanding the birth cycle and allowing him to support her, not from a place of fear, but from a place of understanding and a place of connection. He didn't have to be the birth partner who was just focused on the outcome, being concerned about healthy mom and healthy baby. He understood that the birth experience is just as important as the birth itself, and that it has this normal progression that he was able to then understand and key in with Jen, and then be that support person that she needed. So because she had all of these three factors, she had the empowerment that she needed to be the one who was leading in her birth, so that she felt in control, which is one of the main things that gives women a feeling of empowerment and can lead to a positive birth outcome. Now, she felt that control because she had that trust in her body, and she was able to endure a long labor that came from that interaction of her body and from her mind, by truly understanding her needs and being able to communicate all of that with her birth team. And she had that consistent support from her husband and her entire birth team, because she was the one that was leading them, that was guiding them. She was the one in control of the journey and the outcome. And because of that, she had everything that she needed to feel good about her choices and feel like she had a positive birth experience. So here's the thing about Jen's birth that might be a little bit surprising to hear after we just talked about how positive she talks about her birth experience. Well, Jen actually ended up having a C-section that she decided that she needed. So she had a bit of a prolonged labor. And when she was telling me the story, she told me how her midwife was really impressed with her ability to handle the type of contractions that she was having, because they were pretty intense and she was getting a lot of back-to-back contractions, and it went on like that for 2 days. So after, Jen and her husband had planned to have this birth at a birth center. So after starting out there, a C-section is definitely not what Jen and her husband had expected. I mean, they hadn't even anticipated having their baby in a hospital at all. But Jen labored until she hit what she knew was her limit. And then she was able to reframe what was going to be best for her birth and what was going to be best for herself and for her baby, and get the help she needed and accept the change in how her baby ended up entering the world. So Jen told me when we were going over her birth story that she had such a positive and strong feeling about how she was able to manage the contractions throughout her labor and her birth, that even though it didn't end up how she expected, she really felt like she was the one in control of her experience and her choices. So she was still able to feel relaxed and enjoy the day that her son was born, even though it ended up in a C-section, not the birth in a birth center that she had planned on. And we can talk about, now that we have this shared understanding and this shared language here in this group, is that Jen is an East. So changes in plans for her do not come easy for East moms, but she was able to make that change. And Jen is pretty strong in her East. She's actually a professional organizer, which is super common for people who are East. So for her, organization and plans and everything having its place and its way to unfold is really a strong part of her personality. So being able to make that change as she needed to, it isn't necessarily an easy thing for somebody like Jen to do, but for her, because she understood that and she was prepared to manage those kinds of obstacles, for her, when the time came for her to decide that that's what she needed, and she was the one who made that call, it wasn't anybody who told her she had to do that. She was able to check in with herself and realize that something wasn't going right and that she needed help. And when they did make that change and she went to the hospital and opted to do the C-section eventually, it turned out that her little guy was actually in a really difficult position for a vaginal birth, which is one of those conversations for another day, to what point you can try to reposition a baby during labor, what kinds of things may have held that up. But finding that out as a result of having a C-section validated her experience and her decision for her, that she, validated that she really was able to trust her instinct and that that was what she needed to do for that birth at that time. So you can see that Jen, she really had found that ability to trust herself and her judgments about what she needed in her birth. And then what helped for her to feel so much more supported is that she had the trust of her birth team. So that when she said she was at her limit and she needed to rest, her birth team didn't question her. They just helped her get ready and helped her make that transition as smoothly as possible. Sometimes not feeling like your birth team trusts you is one of the biggest obstacles to natural birth. But this was not the case for Jen, because she was able to have all of these conversations with her birth team beforehand. So they were able to build complete trust in her, that she would know what to do, that she would be able to communicate that with them. When your birth team can't trust you to communicate what you need, or they don't know if they can trust you to know what you need, that can make things really confusing and complicated. But because they had worked this out beforehand, that meant she could go into her deep labor place for 2 days of having what probably was actually back labor, But having these back-to-back really intense contractions for 2 days, and she had her husband there able to help her go through the contractions. And because he knew the birth cycle and he knew the contraction cycle, he was prepared to roll through all of that with her and help talk her through it when she needed it. And he was able to be there when she needed to be flexible in changing her birth plan so that she could feel safe and supported in making that decision. This theme of the cycle, it runs throughout all positive birth experiences. Even if they aren't perfect, even if they end in a C-section, which sometimes are absolutely justified. And, we know that probably somewhere close to 10% of women truly do need a C-section in order for their baby to safely enter this world. But what really matters is that, was that method the right call for you? Is it what you needed in birth? Or were you coerced into a surgery that you really didn't need, or any other kind of intervention, even if it's a seemingly small intervention, like a vaginal exam that you decide you don't really want or you're not comfortable with, but it's kind of being pushed upon you and you feel that you are put in a position where you have to accept it? That's when things like regret and disappointment or anger about how your birth unfolded or even a birth outcome, that's how those feelings arise for women who have a difficult birth experience or a traumatic birth experience, which we're all here trying to limit and avoid. But at least for now, I think we want to work on limiting the amount of traumatic birth experiences that we're having to help women through after, or help them prepare for a second birth or a third birth after a traumatic birth experience. We're just hearing far too many of these stories, and they really come about when your choice wasn't really a choice at all. It ended up as a product of manipulation. And I know that some of this stuff might sound like it's coming from a place of harshness or of anger with the system, or is over exaggerated, but it's really not, when the reality of what we see in birth outcomes is that 1 in 3 births happening via surgery, and more than half of all births have multiple interventions as part of the birth process. These are things that we need to be correcting because it's not the natural way for birth to unfold. And when you talk to midwives who have more of a stance of being just at the periphery of birth and allowing birth to unfold without disturbance, an undisturbed birth, we don't see the same numbers that we see in any other kind of managed care approach to birth. So these are really important things that we need to have. The women who are the ones out there experiencing birth need to be part of the voice in helping us to start to change how birth is understood, how birth is accepted, and how birth is allowed to unfold in a more natural manner. So I want to turn to another example. This is Star, who is also an East. Star is one of those types who always has a plan about pretty much everything in her life. She's very confident and she really trusts in birth. She's one of those people who grew up in a household where her mom did have home births. So her younger siblings, she knew that they were born at home. To her, home birth was completely a natural event and just a natural part of life. So out of hospital birth for her was a completely normal and natural choice. But in her first birth, things didn't quite go as planned. And she did end up having to transfer to the hospital after having a labor that lasted for several days. And she had a point where she just really didn't know what to do anymore. And so transferring to the hospital seemed like the next logical best step. So Star came to my course for her second birth because she wanted to try again to have an out of hospital birth for her second baby. And she wanted the experience, regardless of where it was, to be different from what happened in her first birth. Basically, what happened for her is that, so they planned a home birth for the first, and she did go into labor on time, but it ended up being a long prodromal labor. So it didn't really pick up strength or speed. And it went on that way for about 3 days of labor that she could still, walk around with, that she could still kind of carry on relatively normal. It just wasn't picking up in the way that a labor should. So after 3 days of that happening and her starting to get really frustrated with the fact that she had been in labor all this time and hadn't had cervical dilation, the contractions weren't coming on any stronger or for any longer amount of time, she finally decided that what she needed to do was to go to the hospital, basically because she didn't know what else to do at that point. So we went through this process of helping her understand her birth type and different aspects of how that may have contributed to how that birth experience happened. And I'll share a little bit more about the specifics of that birth here. But some of the things that Star noticed about herself after learning about the birth types was that unexpected twist of transferring her birth was not according to her plan as an East, right? She had this plan, she had this expectation of what was going to happen for her birth. And since she didn't have the confidence and trust that she needed in herself, she took the only next step that she could think of, which was to go to the hospital. So we discussed at length in some birth coaching that we did how her plan and her inflexibility, because of her strong East tendencies, may have been a factor in that prodromal labor, that she just couldn't allow herself to relax and she couldn't let her body just do what she needed to do. She was trying really hard to control the situation and to make herself go into labor. But her very need to be in control may have been the thing or one of the things that contributed to her birth going further and further out of her control and lasting longer and longer without being able to build up, because she was just holding that state that she was in so tightly instead of just relaxing and giving in to the natural flow of labor, which can be a problem for people who are very strong in their East, like Star is. And this might help you to see how that can happen when our strengths become so overpowering to us sometimes that they can overpower a natural process like birth. We can get in our own way. Trying to control nature or a natural cycle is really way out of our grasp as a human being, but we will always continue to try and control as much as we can, even when it's something that we know is a natural cycle. There's some part of the way that our brain works as a human that makes us really want to try and control all of these natural cycles. And we've done a pretty good job. Whether or not it's to our benefit is a different story. So the other aspect for Star was the communication with her husband and really with her whole birth team. So unlike Jen, where they had done all of this work ahead of time, in Star's first birth, they hadn't done the work ahead of time. They hadn't prepared in this way with their communication so that Star felt supported and felt like she had the help that she needed if things didn't go according to plan. So because East types have this really can-do attitude is really strong for them, and that serves them well in many cases. Like, we need East type people because they have that attitude of being able to get things done. But in birth, this can work counterproductively to allowing your birth from unfolding. And it really, for Star, it prevented her from really calling on her midwife for more guidance in that earlier part of her labor, because she was just so invested and so confident in the plan that she had made for having her home birth and in her preparation. But what she was lacking was the flexibility and the ability to be open to suggestion. Remember, we said that can be an obstacle for East people, is that ability to be open and receiving of information. And that can be really challenging for East people, especially if nobody's pointed out to them that's something that they may struggle with, right? Then they're not even aware that it's a problem. She didn't even realize that she hadn't had this discussion, or that she didn't ask her midwife what she should be doing. We don't always notice when our own strengths start to overpower even our own selves and get in the way of things that are there to benefit us. Sometimes we just become our own obstacle. It's not anybody else outside of us. It's something that we're doing even to ourselves. So with her husband, the communication there, they ended up having trouble managing communication. I mean, it wasn't as much of a problem before they transferred to the hospital, because it wasn't what Star needed at that point in the birth. But when they got to the hospital, she did need her husband to help her be a communicator, even though their midwife actually went with them when they transferred. So she was there for most of the labor. But because the midwife and the doctor were not really on the same page about birth and their own areas of trust in their birth, right? They each have their own set of biases and agendas. And in this case, a home birth midwife and a hospital-based OB, the biases between the two of them, they don't really match, which is really to be expected, right? But the midwife, once that transfer happens, the midwife doesn't really have any kind of medical authority at that point in most hospital scenarios. Now that can vary depending on where you are in the world and what the hospital and midwife policies are. But where Star was, this midwife was a licensed midwife, but not a nurse midwife. So she couldn't transfer into the hospital to provide medical care. She just becomes more of a support person for the laboring mom in that point. So she wasn't really able to help mediate the situation for Star and her husband with the whole medical team there. And Star's husband wasn't really prepared to take on that kind of responsibility because Star was so certain they were going to have a home birth. Even though they took a birth class, but the birth class that they took when it came to communication, all they had was the acronym system, which you now know are not really useful when when you know what it is that you want or what it is that you don't want. The acronym serves no purpose at that point. You have to know how to voice what it is that you want, or even sometimes it's even knowing that you have the option to voice what it is that you want or don't want. Sometimes people go into their birth and they don't even know that they have the option to be that voice for themselves or for their birth partner. So in this particular case, Star's husband felt really powerless and he actually felt really disrespected by the birth team when he did try to talk to them. And then that left Star feeling really unsupported because he wasn't able to help advocate for her and help be the support person that she was really hoping to have in her birth. So after she went through the birth course for the second birth and we did some coaching, she saw how her East patterns are really present for her all the time in how she parents, in how she carries out her relationship with her husband, even in things like the jobs that she's had in the past, how she manages her household. And this is what you all will probably start noticing as well as you think about your type and how it starts to show up in your life now that you know that it's there. So once Star had that knowledge, she started to change some of the small habits in her day. So she started being more spontaneous and flexible. She stopped putting that pressure on herself of always having a plan, that having things have to go to that plan, so that she was not feeling pressured to stick to that plan and have that outcome. She, started having these small changes, like being able to stop a task at one of her household tasks midday to be able to go play with her daughter rather than feeling like she had to finish that task before she could take a break to go and play with her daughter. She also started recognizing in herself the need for self-care. So like many East types, in her first pregnancy, she'd been working a lot in her pregnancy and she was trying to keep up with her same exercise routine and then, just regular social demands and everything of regular life. All of those were taking attention away from her internal state, from her ability to relax and to rest and to really prep for birth. So now this time around, she's learning to just let go from time to time and really see what that can feel like, not meeting everybody else's demands, not putting these pressures on herself that are actually coming from her. She realized how much of the pressure she was feeling was coming from demands that she was putting on herself. Nobody else was putting those demands on her. But as an East person, she always felt like she had to get all of these things done, and then has the can-do attitude of, I can just do it all. And she noticed how not doing that probably played a role last time, not taking that time out to really address her ability to be rested and to be relaxing and just checking in with her internal state, how that inhibited the natural unfolding of her birth in her first birth. She also started noticing that she had this tendency to set expectations for other people, especially her husband. And she realized that she really wasn't asking for what she wanted. She would just kind of set an expectation, not voice it. And then when it wasn't met, she would feel disappointment and then she started noticing that she had this tendency to make a sarcastic comment. And as she she was doing this, she started changing that behavior, and she started to actually ask her husband for the things that she needed. Like one night, she said she had asked him to just turn the lamp off at bedtime instead of just commenting on why the lamp was still on. And he noticed this change in how she approached the situation. And he was shocked. And he actually said that he was really proud of her for actually asking him to turn the light off instead of just making a commentary about it, which, is so great. And, it just shows that their communication is just building more and more in all aspects of their life. It will serve them really well in birth, but it's also going to serve them well as a couple, as parents, as everything else that they go on to do in their life. And all of this just came about from really noticing these patterns and these cycles that were occurring in her all the time, in her life all the time, because it's really easy to just stay too stuck in our dominant type and fail to move fluidly between the different types when we need to. But ultimately, when we really grasp the full understanding of the cycles and how they work, that's exactly what we should be doing. We want to use the strengths of the right direction for the right purpose at the right time. I'm going to say that one more time for you, because this ultimately is everything that philosophy and nature, this is what they're teaching us about life and about being human. So the goal is to use the strength of the right guiding direction for the right purpose at the right time. So that's the key to really being in control of your reactions and your responses to everything in your life all the time. And though when I say it, it's just one simple sentence, it's really a difficult thing to do because we get so stuck in our dominant type and we don't understand how to move fluidly through the whole cycle. But if you can start to get this and you can start to put it together, you will have so much more control. And in birth, that's going to mean you will be able to take more responsibility for your own birth experience and your own birth outcome. And that is what results in that positive and empowered birth experience that we're all looking for. So here is what learning about this did for Star. After we did some coaching sessions and going through the course, Star shared with me that before we worked together for the second birth, she was actually dreading having her second baby. She said specifically the word dreading. She was dreading the birth process. She was dreading having to actually give birth to this baby. Now, when I started working with her, I didn't know that she actually had that level of concern about this birth. She hadn't mentioned that she was feeling that much dread about it, which is not uncommon for an East person to not share the actual level of their emotion. I knew that she wanted a different experience, but I didn't know that she was actually dreading her birth. When she talks about her birth, even though she transferred to the hospital, when she told me the original birth story, she still had a vaginal birth. She still didn't have pain control. She didn't have to have any augmentation with Pitocin or anything. And she still described feeling really powerful in that birth. So I was really surprised that when we were talking about this at the end, that she had been feeling dread about this upcoming birth. That's not what I expected her to say. But what made going through this process really worth everything to me, and why I continue to do this work, is that when we finished the course and finished doing the coaching calls with her, around 37 weeks, I think she was when we finished, she was feeling really excited for her birth. She couldn't wait to see how she and her husband would have a completely different experience this time. She was looking forward to actually experiencing the full transformation in birth that a mother should have. And she talks about her first birth positively. It wasn't what she would call a negative birth experience, but it was definitely not all it could be. There were definitely a lot of pieces where she was not supported and where she would have done things differently had she had a different level of support and a different level of insight and a different understanding of the birth cycle. Now, Star, her process of going through all of this, she actually volunteered to come on and do a series of coaching calls that we recorded that she allowed me to put on the podcast. So you can listen to this whole transformation of how her first birth story is in there, and then what she goes through as she goes through this whole process, and just hear that transformation as it comes out through her. So, finding your strength. So I hope that hearing these examples of Jen and of Star, and now, that you've gone through this workshop over these last several days and have been able to learn something more about yourself, have some insight into your natural strengths and where your natural challenges might pop up that you need to be able to be prepared for, and how you can develop a stronger communication strategy than just having that acronym that I think I have probably beat over the head at this point. The acronym that might still leave you vulnerable if your provider doesn't give you all of the information or doesn't know all of the information, because they only know, what their experience has been, and something that they leave out or something that they don't know might be vital information for you to know in order to make a choice that is really in line with what you want for your birth and for your baby. Do you see how you're really understanding this stuff at this level can create an entirely new possibility for your birth? How you can be the one that's in control of your birth and directs your birth team? How getting to know the nature of birth and the nature of yourself, where those things can meet and come together to help you have insight into what to expect for the entire birth process. What could be possible for your birth, for your transformation that you get out of your birth, if you can just relax and just be with your birth and just be with the birth cycle, like what Star wanted to have done during her first birth. Knowing that you had built up your knowledge of birth in a way that just made it really second nature, knowing that you also have this communication strategy that's in your heart, not in your head, so you don't have to pull it all out. Knowing that you can manage anything unexpected because the birth cycle is just there in your very cells, and your communication strategy is really clear. And you also have your birth partner truly prepared to be that support person, not just somebody standing at the bedside holding your hand, praying that you're going to get through to the end and that everything's going to be okay, but they actually know how to support the whole experience and have trust in birth themselves, which is going to help you have more trust in your birth as well. Now, I can't guarantee that after doing this workshop, any of you are going to have a perfect birth, whatever perfect means, right? And you may end up having to completely change some aspects of your birth, change your birth environment, change your birth team, even change the way your baby comes into this world. None of that is predictable about birth. It never is. But you can feel empowered and you can feel confident that you are the one making your choices. If you have the empowerment and the knowledge to make those choices, if you don't come out on the other side of your birth feeling like you were actually manipulated into something that you didn't need, that impacted your recovery or impacted your bonding with your baby or impacted your capacity to feel powerful and feel ready to take on that role of parent for this child. So the first step in any birth preparation, I'm going to say it over and over again, what we've been talking about this whole time, is to really continue to understand yourself. Get really clear on you and your needs. And then the second step is to get really clear on the birth cycle, which comes from really seeing how it plays out in nature all the time, every day, every month, every year. It's all out there for you to see and for you to watch and understand if you're open to seeing how it's there for you. When you really understand yourself and you understand the very nature of birth, it comes together and it opens up this space for this really beautiful event of your birth that unfolds exactly in the way that nature intended it to unfold. In Chinese medicine, Chinese philosophy, you may be familiar with this concept of the Tao or the Way, which is how it's translated into English. And that's exactly what we're talking about when we talk about the Tao. It means that you're going with the way of nature rather than getting in the way of nature. In birth, we have this immense capacity to get in the way of something that is supposed to unfold in a very natural way, right? It's something that should be very outside of us and very inside of us, but not something that's done to us. When you are able to go with the way of it instead of getting in the way, whether it's yourself getting in your own way, as started in her first birth, potentially by trying to control the unfolding of her birth by, trying to make it happen, trying to think about it, over planning everything, or if it's other people getting in the way of your birth and disrupting your natural flow of birth. When you're able to just go with the way of nature, there are no obstacles. You are just guided by nature and the way that birth unfolds. You don't have to think about it. You don't have to ever think about do you have enough oxytocin? What is the prolactin doing? What is your estrogen and progesterone doing? Those are not things you should be thinking about in your birth. That takes way too much of your thinking brain. Maybe your providers are thinking about that. That's their world, but not your world. So as we get ready to wrap up this workshop, I just want to prepare you for taking those next steps by showing you a little bit about the birth cycle, because I've brought it into our discussion over the last few days because it's such an integral part to birth. So this is how birth fits onto the compass that we've been talking about, these 4 directions, and now you can see a little bit how it becomes a cycle. And there is a reason you see that north is at the bottom and south is at the top. There is a reason for that. It's based on Eastern philosophy that I'm not going to get into today because we would be here for another 30, 40 minutes just to explain that concept. But what's important to notice is that just as each of your birth types has strengths, has challenges, each of the directions in the birth cycle also has a very specific purpose and a very specific role in the birth cycle. So remember, we talked about these in regard to seasons a little bit the other day, the quiet, hidden signs of early labor that resides in the north. So where everything is still hidden away. So this, remember, was our winter time, the very middle of the nighttime when everything's cloaked in darkness. Nobody knows what's happening under there, or, that blanket of snow. The earth is still moving under there. It's still alive under there, but you can't see what's happening. When you're looking at the surface, you just see the snow. Or if it's dark, you don't really see anything, maybe some starlight, but you don't see anything on the earth. But the shift into labor, that activity, it's still happening. It's just very quiet and it's very discreet. And then you move into the energetics of the east. So previously I said east is the spring. So that's when everything springs to life, right? This is the active labor, when your cervix is actively dilating, your baby is actively moving through the birth canal. For those of you who resonate most strongly with the east, this is that get it done energy that Star had and Jen had. If you're an east person, then you probably understand what that means. Then we have the south, which is that wide open expanse of summer. This is full dilation, pushing your baby out into the world. The most open and giving that you will ever be is at this stage of birth. This is when, we talked about South people being the connectors in the community. Well, this stage is about a whole lot of connections that are transitioning and changing. So your baby's connection transitions from being safe and hidden away in the intrauterine space in your womb to coming out and connecting with the external world and connecting with you as the parents on the other side of the womb. And that final connection to their organ of life that they have been connected to for the last 9 months, that placenta, that is going to transition to being connected now to the air and to the oxygen that fills our lungs and keeps us alive. And then we have the West, which is that harvest time, the autumn time, all about nourishment. This is where you bond with your newborn. You spend time skin to skin. You take in each other's smells. You see each other for the first time. All of the senses get activated at this point in time. And then you'll start nourishing your newborn with your very nutritious, healthy colostrum. So you can really get the idea for how simple understanding the stages of labor can be, why it can be so intuitive and so natural to be able to see how birth can just unfold and just trust that it unfolds in this way, in the same way that one season transitions into another season. We don't make it happen. Nothing makes it happen. That's just the natural order of things. In conventional medicine approach to birth, we have stages and cervical dilation and timing of everything. the nature of the birth cycle is that it perfectly correlates with everything that we already understand as a part of our life. And it's been there in your life and part of your life and guiding your life since you yourself were conceived, possibly even since you were already an egg in your mother's ovary when shortly after she was conceived. And this same cycle that right here we're bringing as the birth cycle, this cycle happens over and over again in all kinds of ways. So in birth, we also see it again in how contractions happen and unfold, one contraction to the next. But it happens with our heartbeat. This is our sleep and wake cycle. It's the menstrual cycle. All of this aligns when you start to see how this cycle has been happening within you, outside of you, how you've been responding to it. And it gives you a glimpse into the nature of birth. And by having this framework, you can also understand how sometimes things can go wrong. But when you know where you are in this framework, you can understand potentially how to go in there and fix it. So if any part of your cycle is struggling, you can get insight into what it is that you need to do. So one example that I give in the course that people always can relate to is what causes that hangry state. Have you guys heard that word hangry? When you are hungry to the point that it causes you to be irritable. Some people experience that, not everybody does, but it's because your emotions are a whole other level that relates to your physical body as well. And we haven't even begun to touch on emotions in this workshop, but they have a few levels of emotions help us to take action in our day. But when they get to a certain point, we see them on the surface. That's what more of us know as emotion, is when it's expressed on the surface and we relate to each other and read each other's emotions in that way. We feel emotions. But at the quiet and subdued level, emotions are actually what help us to take the right action in our day. By understanding how your emotions play a role in your birth, just as Star was using her emotions to control her labor, when you start to be able to identify those things, you have this whole other set of tools that you can use in your birth. And like the others, this tool also becomes a tremendous value for parenting, for maintaining a healthy relationship with your partner, and especially as your roles change in the coming months, as you grow and expand your family and all the dynamics within your family start to change. Having all of these tools in that toolbox just helps you to be able to move through those transitions more smoothly, just like the transition that happens in birth. So I do want to share with you. So here's the framework in all its glory. This is in your workbook, I believe. So you guys have all these diagrams in there. So you can take a look at those and kind of study them and see all of these different levels. But if you're interested in taking things to the next level, then I do have a childbirth education course. So I'm just going to share a little bit about that with you now. If anybody here knows that they don't want to do a childbirth course, then we are about wrapped up with all of the information. But for those of you who are curious about doing a full natural childbirth course and the possibility, of having a natural birth that stays in your control, that involves your partner at a level beyond just timing contractions, holding your hand, your birth partner, having them equipped to be able to actually understand the full birth cycle and invest in your full experience and have that shared language that brings you closer together in general. If you want to, take things to that deeper level for everything that comes in preparing yourself for birth and after birth, then my class is open right now to take on some new students and, might be a perfect match for you. So it is a full childbirth preparation course. We start with the information that we covered over the course of this workshop, and then we start to layer in the emotions, the birth cycle, of course, a full module on the birth cycle. And then we cover also things like comfort techniques, but you're going to know how to bring those comfort techniques in. So instead of just throwing an acronym at you and then giving you the techniques, you're going to understand more how to incorporate those into the full capacity of your birth because you've done all of this work on yourself and the birth cycle first. There is a specific birth partner little course. I think I talked about that earlier, a little mini course that really just kind of helps to inspire them to go on this journey of birth preparation with you, why it's important for them to be a part of the process. And there's also how to create your birth plan. So it's, of course, it's going to be a very different approach than any other birth plan prep that you've probably seen. It's not just a template with things that you want or don't want, it's a full approach to get the right support that you need throughout all aspects of the birth. And there's also, I know somebody was asking earlier in the week about nutrition. There is a full prenatal nutrition course in there as well, because I do find that having access to information about proper nutrition and trying to bring that in as much as you can does make a really big impact on pregnancy and birth and postpartum recovery. There's, a lot of key nutrients and certain ratios of different types of foods that actually can seem to make a big impact on all of that. So that's in there for you as well. It's that part of the course is all pre-recorded. It's on demand. So you just do it at your own pace. And then I do have live calls every month covering, whatever topics are needed for the people who are there. We can spend time doing Q&As sometimes, or if we want to dive in as a group on a particular topic, then we do that. That part is all, open to whatever is needed in the moment. It's kind of a women's circle type of gathering, and then just a time to make sure that you're getting all of your questions answered, and anything specific that comes up for you, then you have a time to bring that and get those questions answered as well. So I would love to have you join me over there if you are loving this style and this approach, so we can continue to go deeper into your birth preparation. So I know that some of you are earlier on in your pregnancy and, like halfway through. And even if you think it might be too early to take a course, it's probably not. And since right now I'm offering it as just a one-time payment and you get the whole course, there's no reason to not start it as early as possible. But I hope that, what you've heard here and what you've seen here can show you why it's important to not wait too long to sign up for your course. Star and I, so she, started from a place of dread. Remember, we started working together when she was coming up on about 20 weeks, and she really needed every one of those weeks to get ready. I know that some of you also are at the other end of the spectrum where you don't have as much time, but unless you're really like in the last week or two, as long as you have a few weeks, you can definitely get through the 5 modules and the birth plan course. You probably won't need the nutrition course as much at that point. It's, if you have the time, it's great to go through, because even having 1 week of using the approach that's in there can help as far as getting labor to start on time and having the energy that you need throughout labor to help give you that endurance factor. But if you just have a few weeks, you can easily get through it. The modules are not that long, and you've really done a lot of the first part of it by coming to this workshop. So module 1, you'll get through really fast because you've done most of that already. And then it's just a few modules of more learning about birth, and then some hands-on stuff that you take with you into the birth. So basically what happens in that course is, it takes everything that we have gone over in these last 4 days, everything you've learned here about your type and your communication, and it brings it all together into what actually happens as birth unfolds in a calm, safe, and natural way. So I know that I have packed a lot in today and then just presented this offer, but if anybody has any questions, I am happy to stay on and answer a few questions. The classes in the course are a much smoother pace than things are when I'm teaching live. I get really excited when I am, when I do the monthly calls or anytime that I have an opportunity to do these workshops, and I just want to get as much information out there as possible. And because this information is such a circular learning, some of it has to kind of be repeated and brought back. And so it's very different from more of a Western approach. So if you want to join the program, you can find it at naturalbirthcompass.com. Or you are always welcome to email me, or you can find me on Facebook or Instagram, just at Natural Birth Compass. And I am excited to continue on with those of you who will be continuing on with the full course. And for those of you who have babies coming soon, I wish you all really wonderful, beautiful natural births. I would love to hear how they go, how this information comes into the birth room with you. So feel free to shoot me a follow-up after your babies arrive and let me know how things went. All right. Well, I will sign us off for today. It has been such a pleasure. Thank you all so much for coming and sharing this information with you. I love having the opportunity to talk about all things birth and to really help women find their voice to have a really beautiful, amazing birth. And I hope you all have wonderful support from your birth partners as well. Let me know if you need any help on that end of things too. We'll help get them in shape. Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope that you enjoyed the final installment of this workshop and have been able to make great strides in your birth preparation. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast if you would like to continue to hear information about preparing for natural birth. And stay tuned because I have a couple of new students who've been recording their birth coaching calls with me that I'm getting ready to share on the podcast very soon. Again, if you'd like to be notified of future workshops, you can register at naturalbirthcompass.com/natural birth workshop so you can get on the list to be the first to know when our next workshops are open for enrollment. And if you would like the opportunity to work with me to prepare for your birth, head on over to naturalbirthcompass.com/course, where you can learn more about my online childbirth education course. And if you feel it aligns with your vision for your birth, you can join right away for access to the on-demand content, and you get to join in for our monthly live group coaching calls. Stay tuned for upcoming new coaching calls, interviews, and other natural birth preparation tips. Until then, I'm wishing you a wonderful journey to birth.